Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Imperatos webinar, Hack Your Customer's Journey, Connecting the Data You Already Have to Increase Your Marketing ROI. I'll be your presenter today. My name is Luciano Pesci. I'm the founder and director of the Utah Community Research Group at the University of Utah, where I teach econ, stats, data analytics, research, and economic development and history. I'm also the CEO and co-founder of Imperatos. We're a team of analysts, data scientists, and economists who find actionable business intelligence using the very kind of marketing, data, and agile research methods that we'll talk about today, with the purpose of helping them beat their competition. There are 5 main sections that I'm going to go through today in this webinar. I should be able to get through all of them in, I'm hoping, 35 to 40 minutes. At that point, we'll open it up for Q&A. You can enter questions now into the comments, or if depending on if you're using the web application, it might be listed as questions, or the chat. We'll be checking both of those in real time. So if you have anything while we're going along, feel free to ask it, but otherwise there will be time at the end specifically for it. So let's go through the first part, the customer journey map, the main purpose and framework of this webinar. This is not a new concept. We did not create this concept. The level of detail that the customer journey map has depends very heavily on who it is that's utilizing it. We're going to start simply today. There's really 3 pieces: awareness, consideration, and purchase. And I'm going to talk about why it is worth your time as marketers to use this framework to organize the data you have, to then connect the data you have so that you can be increasing your ROI, which means you're attracting customers whose value is much higher than their cost of acquisition. But I'm going to reverse that process in my explanation. So though a customer will start at awareness, then move into consideration, and then purchase, since you already have been marketing and have data and have a CRM or some central repository where you have customer records, that's where you should start. And you should be specifically looking for ways to rank their value and then tracing them back through the different steps. So we'll start with purchase in the CRM. The data that's available in there, how you can use it, how you can then connect it back to consideration, and how the consideration stage depends very heavily on your competition and ways in which you can go out and get competitive intelligence on people that's totally legal, totally public source, and will help you framing your own marketing mix and your messaging and the product features that you push forward and the pricing. And then once we're done with consideration and all the data sources there, I'll show you how they can be connected to awareness. So this is advertisement, this is banner ads, pay-per-clicks, SEO, social, offline. We'll talk about different offline methods and how to create data if it's not already being created automatically. And again, how that data then can be connected to the consideration stage, which can then be connected to the purchase stage, which then you can see how your most valuable customers are moving through this entire funnel and becoming the core of your business. As great as data is, and I love data, it does not tell you why, it just tells you what. And so for adding that additional level of insight, you have to turn to research methods. And I will talk about agile methods, which we use at Imperatos and which I encourage you to use and which I teach at the university. So let's start with the customer journey map. If you just go Google search customer journey map, it is incredible the level of detail some organizations have created these maps for themselves. And they put it right out there online. There are lots of blogs that show you how to do this. I think the highest count that I had when I was just looking through the different searches was 74 steps in the customer journey map. That's great. If you can get to that point where you have that much data and that much insight, obviously that's where you should be going. But most people right now, especially in SMBs, don't have the connection between a lot of these different data sets. It's possible to set it up, it just hasn't been done. So data is being siloed, which means you might not be able to have 13 steps dedicated just to awareness. You might just have to understand the channel mix in general. And that's still, and we'll get into this, that's still far better as far as a map goes. Having that 3-stage breakdown and understanding each one allows you to then start drilling down to eventually get to where you have 70 something. So the customer journey is just a framework. It's just a way of thinking. And we use it at Imperatos a lot in conjunction with the business or the product life cycle. Because where you're at in the business life cycle with your product, or the product life cycle in particular, may determine a lot of what is happening with your customer journey. So there are a couple frameworks we use. The customer journey is a critical one. And I want to separate out in your mind the customer journey overall from the piece that we're going to talk about today. We're going to go from awareness, where they don't know you or your product or anything about you. They just realize they have a need and they start actively looking for a solution. And then they'll move through looking at all the available options to eventually making a purchase, hopefully with you. That's really the customer journey as we use it. From that point on, they're now a customer, and customer experience allows you to look, and sometimes you can see the bow tie, reverse funnel. Purchase is right at the core of that. Once they are a customer, there's a lot that's very different. It's worth conceptually dividing it out. And customer experience is much more focused on things like satisfaction, retention, and brand advocacy, and not so much on continuing brand awareness or attracting new customers or conversion rate optimization. But to get to where you have a customer experience, you first need to turn them into a customer. The purpose of mapping this whole thing out is that you can learn 4 critical pieces: the channel mix, which is tied to awareness, and the messaging, which is also tied to awareness and consideration. The product features, and again, this is why I said we use the business life cycle or the product life cycle as a pair to the customer journey. Because if you're a really established business, you may not be able to change anything about your product or any of the features. If you're a startup, you can probably change all of them. If you're about to pivot as an organization, you're in the mature, potentially the death phase, and you need to innovate and pivot as a company and create new products, you might then be able to change features. They're not easy to change, but they are easy to message. And so product features and landing pages in particular, which we'll get into today, give you a lot of evidence about what product features, when you're highlighting them, are leading to actual sales. And then price, which we'll get from the CRM. But the purpose of learning these 4 things through the mapping of the customer journey is so that you can figure out from your CRM or whatever customer records you have who the most profitable customers are. And I'll define that again as the people who are bringing in the most sales at the lowest cost of acquisition, and how you can then reverse engineer their journey from awareness to purchase and then replicate it and scale it up. Like I said before, the more detailed you can make this map, the better, but you need to start broad. It does not have to be perfect. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about both data and research, and I have to hammer this into students at the university. It does not have to be perfect. It just needs to be better than whatever it is you're doing right now. And if you are continually improving on it, eventually you'll start to approximate something like perfection. So those 3 pieces, the 3 steps for framing the first part of your map, are awareness, consideration, and purchase. So let's go over each in detail again, because I'm going to then reverse this order and talk about purchase all the way back to awareness. But a customer does start with awareness. They're sitting at home, they see an ad. They might be on TV, it could have been on radio, could have been on their tablet, it could have been they were searching and it's at the top of the search page. They become aware that they have a need and they start actively searching for a solution. And that's the defining point. And some people will subdivide awareness into, there's a knowledge piece that's sometimes put in here as well. But once the customer realizes they have a need and they start looking for a solution, if you're in front of them, you should be able to move with them to the next stage, which is consideration. They're going to learn everything they can about you. They're going to search online. They're going to talk to people they know. They're going to read reviews. They're also going to go figure out who your competitors are, who's offering an alternative solution for their need, and how the market overall could fill it. Once they have all of that information, they make a decision. And this is the critical decision. Do they purchase? Do they purchase at all is the first question. And more specifically, do they purchase then with you? And so by using these 3 pieces, I will show you how to increase your marketing ROI by targeting only the most valuable customers. I said before, we're going to flip our mindset here, and this is true right now is the moment. I talked about awareness through consideration of purchase. You, because you're already sitting on existing data, should actually go in the opposite direction that your customer moves. You should start with purchase and you should start understanding what is going into purchase and reverse engineer from there all the way back to awareness. This can be done by connecting the data that you already have. So a lot of the SaaS programs that all of you are using have data that can be incorporated into this map. But sometimes you also have to add a layer of research, and I will end this presentation with a conversation about the kind of research that you can do as marketers. The CRM is quickly becoming the hub of all data within organizations. Whether people are buying off-the-shelf solutions like HubSpot, Salesforce, Microsoft, there are a lot of existing prefabricated solutions that can still be very highly customized to your organization. And then there are custom-built CRMs that were built by the company for the company. In all cases, they contain the most concentration of data that we've come across within any organization that we've ever helped. And as integrations are getting easier and easier, more data is being deposited there. And so you now have what might have just started off as a sales tool, then was joined with customer service tools. So again, stuff that's really about the purchase and then the experience. Well, now the marketing data is being brought in, even the financial data is being brought in. And this is great news for you because if it's already connected there, it makes the analysis of this map so much easier. You don't have to start connecting pieces. And so the CRM is a place to go look at, see what's already there, look at the kind of integrations that are available. They're very easy usually to do. But because it's custom, it also means that the data sets are not uniform. They can have you have 40 columns for what really is one variable. And so you have to put some time into cleaning it and reformatting it, which means you have to understand the data that's there. Usually it's as easy as just exporting a CSV. You tell the CRM, I want these different pieces, send it out. Even if it's just a database, if you're using a database internally as your CRM, it's just a query. I want records like this that fit all these criteria, and it will still end up in a CSV file, which you then need to look through, understand, create a data map for. If everything's been integrated, that is your main data set, and you can start mapping. If things haven't been integrated, then you may have to analyze the CRM in isolation and then go and analyze some of the tools that we'll talk about with the next piece, which is consideration. But the purpose of going to the CRM first is that not all customers are created equal. In some of our other webinars and some of our literature, we highlight the Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, that 20% of your customers are generating 80% of your revenue, and in some cases, 80% of your profit. So how do you find that small subgroup? Well, if the CRM has any sort of customer financial data like order histories, amounts that they've spent, if there's referral information, if you have some sort of affiliate program and you can map the referrals that have come into that customer, what you need to do is start to rank these customers based on the financial metrics. And you're probably only going to be able to look at their revenue. If you have a really robust data system, you might be able to tie the actual cost for acquisition right to them at this point. If not, you'll have to piece it together later once we get to the awareness stage, and I'll show you how to do that. But if you can really figure out the highest value customers, they become your target. And it's not as though you ignore the rest. It's just that you really start to understand this group first. And they're the group that you start following back from the CRM to all of the consideration data, to all of the awareness data. Every CRM is different. How much information you're going to have will differ, whether you incorporate surveys. So a lot of companies, as part of their customer experience, which is tied into their CRM, they will have surveys that they're sending out. And these might be focused on satisfaction, things that are more related to the customer experience than the customer journey, but you can start to understand what it is about that individual and why they engage with your brand to begin with. And so looking at this entire data set, sometimes in those surveys you have information about competitors. There may even be data you may have honored competitors' offer, a price match situation. You could have intercepted them by, in the awareness stage, by purchasing a competitor's keywords. There might be information in your CRM, but more than likely you're going to have to go out, and this is one of the more manual steps in this mapping process, to figure out consideration. Because, as I pointed out earlier, customers today have more options than anything in the history of the United States. I mean, you just have to go to a grocery store now and look at how many different types of beverages you can buy. I mean, just aisles of different beverages. And that's just if they're going to buy it there in a store. What if they want to have it Amazon dropped, or they're going to have it delivered? They have all of this power to look for information today. But that's also really great for you, because since it's public, you can use it as well. So with that 20% target, the group that's been defined as the highest value customers, right, the 20%, you move from purchase now back to consideration, again, looking mostly at them and what options were available to them at the time that they signed up. And so you can't just look at the market today. If you've had a customer for 5 years, you can look at what's available today. If they keep signing on with you and you're retaining them, that's telling you some information. But it may be that a competitor is no longer even an option, or it might be that there are 5 new competitors that weren't there when they actually signed up. But the point is, you have to go out and be proactive. You have to start to gather some of this information. If it's in your CRM, great. A lot of phone call records. If you have automatic transcription for call centers, and people will talk about, well, I was on AT&T and then I moved over to Verizon. If that data is in the CRM, you can start to figure out some of the paths that your customer came through and the other options they had available. If you have none of this data in your CRM, don't worry. It's extremely easy to find right now. And when I say extremely easy, that underemphasizes just how easy it really is, because your competitors are posting to social media, which means you can see what their strategy is. You can see how often they're posting, what they're posting on, what they're linking to, who is liking it, who is sharing it. You can scrape the web. There are tools that will scrape the web for the keywords that they're using in their SEO. There are tools that will show you all the words that they're purchasing. You can look at Google Trends for just aggregate searches. AdWords Keyword Planner will tell you specific words and who's bidding, not the individual companies, but how many are bidding and what the estimated value is, the volume tied to each of those words. There's even sites that will aggregate all the banners of your competitors. My point here is, it is not a hard process to just go out to the public domain and get a wealth of information about your competitors' products, pricing, marketing messaging, and channel strategy. And if you're really good with code, and we'll get into some of the tracking and the way that JavaScript is used to do tracking within a website, if you're fairly comfortable with code, you can also scrape their actual website and start to analyze it for keywords, because this is all public information. Well, once you have that information on your competitors, you've got to figure out how your offering in the eyes of your most profitable customers compared. And so you size up your data that you have against what you've learned from a competitive standpoint. There are also, by the way, aggregate tools that will show you. You can go to knowmyfo.com right now, and you can use our beta tool. The next version will launch in about a month. That beta tool will show you the SEO click value, the pay-per-click value, who the main competitors are, and that's just public information. And so you can get a very good sense of what your competition is doing, and then with your own internal tools, things like Google Analytics, things like any of your A/B testers, so if you're using Optimizely or you're using Unbounce, if you have email tools that you're using, all of these have data on what has been effective for you. And again, you want to look at the aggregates, but then you want to cut down to, well, what about the 20% that's most profitable? What landing pages did they see? What was the messaging on the landing pages that they saw? What was the page that actually converted them? What was their path up to that point through our site? And so your website is a gold mine for this kind of data, especially if you have the correct Google Analytics, or if you are really special and you have some of these higher end solutions like the Marketing Cloud. you can get incredible amounts of information about what's going into how they consider you. And then you frame that against what you know about the rest of the market to start to understand how at this stage you moved them to a purchase. If you do not have any data, you can always build it. Offline stuff is very difficult to track, but you can do this through custom data set creation. And it's getting better. So even some of the traditional marketing, so mass media, billboards, television ads. There are companies that intercept satellite communication and track when something was actually played and then compare it to your web traffic. People are trying day by day to bring in more of the offline marketing. It's not so easy yet. And word of mouth is, and I'll talk about this in the next piece, word of mouth is still one of the hardest and most important in the channel mix that goes into and directly affects consideration. But at this stage, consideration, you're really out to identify 3 of the main pieces. The messaging, which you can get from email success, so you can look at subject line text, you can look at the email body text, you can look at landing page text, you can look at anything around your blogs, your webinars, where you have been out there saying, here's our solution to your need. So the messaging should be very easy to get in this period. What features are resonating also should be able to flush out in this period. And as far as pricing goes, if you have real conversion systems set up and you're doing things like A/B testing around price, you should be able to start to estimate price sensitivities. And we'll get in the research piece to how you can optimize pricing using far more robust methods than just your web analytics. But if you've discovered this, the message, the product features, and the pricing that's working for this group, the next question is, well, where did they come from? This 20% of customers that's so profitable, where did they come from? And how much did it cost for us to acquire them on those channels? And this is where the awareness channel mix kicks in. Online channels are so incredibly easy to do attribution with now. Facebook has a pixel, Twitter has a pixel, LinkedIn is working on a pixel, and even if you don't want to use that, you can always use Google's URL builder, which will append specific kinds of information to the link, so when they hit your page, your Google Analytics grabs it. You can track website behavior, you can track time on page. It's really powerful, and if you're good with code, you can use the analytics.js library. So this is Google Analytics JavaScript library. If you are uncomfortable with code, you can still integrate AdWords to analytics, and you'll see aggregates. You'll see the averages. That's a great place to start, but ideally, you'd love to have this information on an individual customer level because you want to be able to pull out where that 20% is coming from and what they're doing on your site, and all that information is getting fed to the CRM, so that you can be putting things like cost of acquisition in with customer lifetime value in the CRM. But analytics.js is an extremely powerful library, pre-built. It's a lot of code. You just copy paste. You have to know where to put it on the site. But if you set this up, if you put a little bit of time into setting this up correctly, attribution is not very difficult. And if you can then take that attribution and tie it to a financial metric, you can start to make really rational ROI-based calculations and decisions. That's not the case for offline channels. You don't have a Google Analytics that follows you around at conventions and tells you how many people you talked to and what you said and what worked with them. But these are also the far more important channels still. I mean, I know pay-per-click, people are spending huge amounts of money on pay-per-click. None of those things has as much impact on a person's consideration as word of mouth. So if they learned about you as a solution from someone else they trust, they've already overcome a very big obstacle in sales and marketing, which is that they have to actually trust that you're going to deliver a solution that fits their needs. And they know other people and they trust other people more than they trust you. And so word of mouth is still the most important channel, and it is extremely hard to actually measure and track unless you are going to use things like social media as a proxy. And this is, again, where public information can be very powerful. You can go look at one of your competitors' pages and see how they're responding to people. You can read online forums. You can read about their employees and what their employee experience was like. All of this information is available online. So you can get a pretty good idea of word of mouth, but without having a real conversation with a real person or even being able to watch it in some sort of controlled fashion, it is harder to get at these offline channels for attribution. Now, the benefit of these offline channels is you can totally define how you're going to measure and track them, and you can enter them straight into the CRM without having to use any JavaScript, without having to use any fancy integrations. So there are some pros and cons. The biggest pro is that it's very easy to enter this to data sets. However, this usually falls on the back of salespeople, and there is a lot of resistance to do manual data entry. So the more you can automate this, the better. Just like with the consideration stage, there's a point to analyzing awareness, and it is to learn the channel mix that is attracting those target customers. It might be that you have the lowest cost per click for Facebook, but it might be that the most valuable customers are coming from LinkedIn. Same with ads. You may have ads that have very, very low cost per click, but they might not be bringing you customers who are retained. You might be buying people who think you're the right solution, but didn't put in a lot of time for actually considering you or your competitors, sign up, decide they hate you, go out and bash you to everybody that they know, so word of mouth works against you. And this is the whole idea behind Net Promoter Score, is that you should try to avoid a situation where you have more detractors, people out there bashing you, than you have promoters. Well, the only way that that's going to work out is if you are actually fulfilling the need that they initially became aware of, if your solution really fits that need. And so you have to pay attention not just to where the lowest cost per click is, but where these best customers are coming from. And by mapping out the journey, first from this awareness piece, then to consideration, and then to purchase, it's not hard to see that. Now, even the best and most robust data sets. So let's say you have this wonderful CRM where everything's integrated. You see every click, you're heat mapping what they're doing on the page. You know everything about what has happened. That still doesn't tell you why. That doesn't tell you the core reasons behind their need. It's just that you know that this ad in particular performs very well with your target group. They land on this page that's very, very successful. If they bounce, they're retargeted, and after 5 retargets, they're likely to come back, and then they sign up, and then they get halfway through the sign-up process and they stop, and then you have to send them an email, and then 2 emails later they sign up, and now they're a customer. And you've mapped that whole journey. Well, why did it take so much? What was going on in that process? Why did they bounce to begin with? How could you change that part of this journey? Once you have the map, the point of it is to start using it strategically to say, I'm going to help move people along by showing them that I really do have the right solution for their problem. You really can't do this just on the data alone. You need to bring in primary research. And when I say primary research, let me define a couple terms here before we move into this next section on Agile research. Secondary research is something that you do, and it relies on the fact that the information is already out there. So you go online and you find trend reports. You go online and you look at your competitors. You find a past study that somebody did on the market. You find a slide share that one of your competitors did. Another thing that you can do that I didn't mention in the competitive intelligence portion is you can search a domain for hidden file types. So you can search your competitor's domain for .doc, .pdf files. And even if they're not published, but they're on that domain, you can pull them and see them. And so all of that information already exists. You didn't have to create it. And so it's called secondary research. And that's where you should always start. Primary research differs in that you're defining the things that you're going to measure, and then you're going out and you're actually measuring them. If your data isn't connected at every stage from awareness to consideration of purchase, so you don't have your ads set up with unique links to then pipe the right information to your website, so once they land on your page, you know exactly what ad they came from, it's time stamped, you know the type of ad it was, And then once they're on the site, you track them all throughout the site to a conversion page where now you've got their actual personal information. They go into your CRM. Eventually, they become a customer, and you can connect that entire process. If you can't do that, you're going to have to rely on research, because you'll have to look at the CRM in isolation. Then you'll have to go mine your Optimizely data or your unbounced data in isolation. You're going to have to mine your email data in isolation in these different SaaS programs, none of which are talking to each other. You'll have to rely on research, because what you'll be looking at are aggregate values, and they won't tell you all the connections. But if you still understand the aggregate values, you can frame the right kind of questions to go then talk to your customer, your target customers, to figure out their story, what happened and why. And even if you do have one of these very highly integrated systems with a robust CRM, research is going to add a whole level of precision to this that you're not ever going to get with data. Data by itself, without any context, is meaningless. It's just numbers. And your interpretation of those numbers are going to be heavily biased by your personal experience to date. You are probably not your ideal customer. You should plan to speak with the ideal customer directly as part of a layer that you put onto this map. And as far as the main purpose, just like I've said for the different stages of the journey, the main purpose of adding a research layer to all of this is to learn the why behind what's going on, not the what. The what is great. It's in the data. This is where surveys come in. This is where I'm not a particular fan of focus groups. I think they're very, very impersonal. I don't think people like being put in a room that mirrors a police interrogation room with a bunch of strangers and bagels and ask questions. I just don't think it's conducive to natural behavior. Sometimes you have no choice. If you have a physical product that you have to demo, you might need people to be there. But if you can do these things one-on-one, you're going to get a whole different kind of insight behind the why that you'd get through a focus group. So if you're going to go out and conduct primary research, I highly encourage you to look at Agile methods. So Agile research is a subset of market research that was inspired by product development, and specifically Agile product development, which uses 2-week sprints tied to small, clear goals. And every 2 weeks, people work, they come back, they show what's been done, they discuss it, they make a new plan, and then they go into another 2-week cycle. This way of getting insights is 8 times faster. So we have a startup that we've been helping. We help companies at every stage of the business life cycle, but we've been helping in particular a startup. We early on were doing traditional research for them. It took about 4 months. We went through 3 different waves of research, and we basically answered about, I think it was 30 different hypotheses. And that comes in big increments. You would go out for a month or 2 months, get all this information, come back, have a report, and they'd say, okay, well, let's do another round. Let's refine it. And this is actually how we started to discover the Agile methods, because we started getting faster and faster at doing this. And we realized that if we were bringing insights back every 2 weeks, we could answer a significantly larger amount of questions over time. And so now in a typical quarter, we can do about 50 to 60 of these different hypotheses or questions. So this is a far faster approach. And the best part about it is it ensures that you don't show up with information that's not useful anymore, that's outdated. The traditional research timelines are about 4 months to 8 months, depending on how heavy you're going for, if you're going for really deep quantitative stuff. And that's also not typically very useful. We found that we call it the data shotgun. It just overwhelms people. It's just these giant reports with 90 pages and all of this data, and people usually will only latch onto one piece anyways. And so the benefits of Agile research are that it's faster, it keeps you focused, it keeps the information relevant, and it forces you to look at more refined questions. You can't do these giant broad things in a 2-week period. You can still accomplish those broad things over a 3-month period, doing it in 2-week intervals. And by the end, you will have far more actionable information. So if you, as marketers, want to get your hands dirty, you want to get out there and start doing some research, and I highly encourage you to do this, it's not outside of your skill set. You can watch videos. Qualtrics has incredible tutorials online. I know SurveyMonkey does. Google Forms are there. There are a lot of free tools available for you to go out and find information, whether it's secondary or it's primary. You can use social media to find actual customers, including your competitors' customers. You can go look on your competitor's Facebook page or LinkedIn and look at who has talked to them. And then you can reach out to those people and you can say, hey, for a $50 Amazon gift card, I want to talk to you for a half an hour about all the options that you've been considering. You can do this qualitatively, customer interviews where these are one-on-one discussions. If you do them in person, that's great. A lot of people like to do this by phone. You will really only have about 30 minutes with people before they start to get fatigued. That's small scale. That's really good for short bursts. And over time, if you're doing 5 to 10 of these a week, you can start to amass a very big body of insights from a very large group of customers. That's a different approach than a quantitative survey where you're going to get a list and you might buy that list, or you might use a panel company who says they can get you in front of a market, a representative snapshot of the market. And you're going to have a quantitative survey that's probably using Qualtrics that walks them through question by question. And even though it's online, it's basically just a digital form of a paper survey. So the kind of information that you get in a quantitative survey is far more precise in the sense that it's narrow, because everybody read the same question. They might interpret that question slightly differently, but the exact same question with the exact same wording was asked to them at the exact same time in the exact same place with the survey. That's very different than a qualitative conversation. So the types of information you get differ. I would encourage you to always start a quantitative study with qualitative research, because again, you're not your customer and you don't know their experience. And when you talk to even 5 of these people, it's going to open your eyes to the power of research. And my last bit of advice when it comes to research for you, and this is actually a core value at Imperatos, is to think broad, mind deep, and explain simply. So as you're framing a research design or a questionnaire, or the questions you're going to ask in a conversation, or where you're going to go online to scrape for information, be thinking about all the connections as broad as you can. How does what you're after connect everything else? But at some point you have to pick pieces of it, and then you go very, very deep. First with secondary research, followed by qualitative research, and then into a quantitative piece. This could be around messaging. This could be around price. I said I would talk about, at this point, a method for getting at price called discrete choice modeling, which allows you to get, willingness to pay is one of those difficult metrics, because when you ask somebody how much they want to pay, they always tell you nothing. They want it for free or for as cheap as possible. But that's not true. They'll make trade-offs based on what they see with the value. And if you can really learn their actual price sensitivity, that gives you a lot of pricing power. And so discrete choice modeling is a great method, but it's one of those pieces that takes a while. So this could take 3-4 months. We actually had a customer who was working in a market where we did this very kind of study for them. It took 8 months. We went through secondary research, then qualitative research, then quantitative research, and this was a few years ago. And the day we delivered a simulator, it was their entire market. They could look by every subgroup they wanted. It showed all their price sensitivities. The same day that we delivered that, a major new brand came on the market. And the effects of that brand on all the data were not inside of that very complicated market simulator. And it's possible to go back and do another iteration and refine that. But that's the point of research. In a world that's changing now so rapidly, including customer preferences are just changing so rapidly, you have to be able to mine deeply, but very quickly. And if at the end of this, you don't come back with a very simple explanation tied to very specific recommendations, like, I believe that we should be running these campaigns in AdWords, driving to these landing pages that focus on these product features, that list this price, and then are tied to this nurture email campaign because it's going to give us the most valuable customers. And here's the data that supported it, laid out in this beautiful map framework for you so you can see all the different data sets that I used to get to this point and how it's led to this logical conclusion. So you have to be able to think broad, mind deep, and then explain simply. So at this point, I want to open it up to questions. I will again look at the question and the chat. Okay, so we have one question was what's a conversion pixel? Okay, so this is a great question. So a conversion pixel is a piece of code that is given to you by a source. So usually Facebook is probably the most famous. So let me just use Facebook as the example. So as you create a campaign in Facebook, one of the things that you can do is create a pixel, and that pixel is code that's tied to some purpose. So it could be that they just landed on your site. It could be that they made it all the way through a certain form. You will define, and it's an interface with Facebook, it's just drop-down menus. You will define the purpose of this code, it will give it to you, and then you will be able to take it and put it in the header, and it tells you where, and if you use WordPress, this is very easy. You put it right into the header of that page, and then once they have clicked a link on Facebook and then followed it to some website and landed there, and then based on the parameters that you've defined, so let's say they have to get through converting but through an actual lead form. Well, if you set the code on the thank you page after they've completed the lead form, then that pixel will alert Facebook that the person who clicked that ad eventually converted, and then they can show you this person converted. So you're able to track at that individual level from that channel to a page where they're having consideration to a form where either they became a lead or they even made a purchase. And here's another question. What kind of tools can you use to bridge all of these sources of data, i.e. CRM, analytics, primary research? If you don't have the funding for something like Adobe's Marketing Cloud, or even Salesforce, or now Domo rolling out the Business Cloud, there are existing solutions that are trying to connect these. There are cheaper alternatives. Zapier will do one. So one of the biggest bottlenecks right now that we've seen in connecting all the data is it's easy to get from the banner ads or the social channels or some referral site to the Google Analytics data. And then even from the Google Analytics data, it's very easy to get something like a lead-in form that you would put on a WordPress site. But getting from the lead-in form to then one of these pre-existing, prefabbed CRMs like HubSpot, it's ironic that lead-in doesn't integrate with HubSpot since lead-in was started by two people who left HubSpot. But right now they don't communicate very well. You can go through something called Zapier. And it's somebody who wrote code that says, well, we're going to access your file here, and then we're going to access this other file there, and we'll make sure that it all gets connected. So Zapier is an inexpensive solution. There are a lot. This is Domo's whole new promise right now, is that they're the business cloud. They got all these pipelines set up to all these different SaaS data sets, and they'll help you connect them. You can also write the code yourself. A lot of people who have custom CRMs have the code in place. And even with the analytics.js, one of the things that you can do with that code is you can tell it to send the results not to Google Analytics, but to your own database system, so that you have all the data that you'd want in whatever format or structure you'd want. As far as primary research goes and analytics, Tableau is probably the easiest solution for analytics because it integrates with a lot. If you do have a database and it's living on something like Amazon, the Amazon cloud, or the Microsoft cloud, or the Google cloud, or the business cloud, Tableau has integration straight to that, and so you can just grab data from something like, in Amazon's case, you could move it from Amazon to Redshift, which is just internal code with Amazon. And then with Redshift, you can integrate to Tableau, and then you can just start to visualize the data. That data may not have been cleaned. That data may not need to be cleaned, but you are just integrated straight there. It's just like importing a CSV file to Tableau. You can always use the BI solution that Microsoft just came out with. There are a million little competitors now to Tableau. It's partly why its market value has been struggling so much. There's open source solutions. Again, if you're comfortable with some coding, and if you're not going to retire, here's just like my teacher advice. If you're not going to retire in the next 6 years, maybe, I'll give you 10. If you're not going to retire in the next 10 years, you will have to learn how to handle code. It's just going to become, just like data, just like typing, it's just going to be one of those skill sets you are going to have to develop as what is expected of you as a business person. And R is a really good place to start because there's a lot of free online resources. It's free. There's a program called RRattle that you can use that's a drop-down menu. So if you use stuff like SPSS or SAS, it has that kind of feel to it. All free. And there's a piece called R Shiny that you can use with R that allows you to visualize for free so you don't have to pay for Tableau. So if you're going to try to go down this route of learning some coding and learning some analytics, R is the right place to start, though Python is a lot more powerful. As far as primary research goes, Tableau just made an agreement with Qualtrics, so you will be able to integrate straight to Qualtrics with Tableau, which means you can visualize the data that you get from surveys. Again, whether that data is cleaned or not, the answer is probably no, unless you've gone through the process and excluded certain cases. But you can integrate very quickly, so you can start analyzing customer feedback through primary research. And then if you use things like Google Forms, which then goes to a Google Sheet, there are free visualization pieces that you can use there as well. And here's another question. Can the customer journey work with B2B versus B2C? Yes. Just because it's a B2B does not mean that they're not a customer and they don't have a journey. It's just very different. And you may not have the volumes of data. If your organization is dependent on a couple hundred accounts instead of thousands of accounts like a B2C, or millions of accounts like a B2C, the kind and scale and scope of data that you have is going to be very different. Just because you only have a couple hundred records does not make that data any less valuable. You may have to use non-parametric methods, non-traditional statistical methods. They are legitimate, they are powerful, and they're easy to program in R, just like a t-test is easy to program in R. But I think the biggest key with B2B is that the personal relationships usually play a far bigger role. So if you don't have sales and marketing people who are working in real unison and keeping really detailed records of that process, then there's not going to be the kind of digital trail that you'd see with B2C. And so you have to lean a little bit more on research to do B2B. Any other questions? I'm going to give one more moment for anybody to type up questions, and then we're going to call it a day. Is the customer journey something individual companies should do, or how does Imperatas help? The customer journey is absolutely one of the frameworks that you should be using. The other is you should really get honest about where you're at in your own business life cycle. And if you have lots of products, then you can refine that down to your product life cycle. If you have a new product that's about to launch, that's going to take a very different approach. You're going to be putting a lot more attention on awareness than you probably are on consideration and purchase at that point. But yes, this is something individual companies should be doing. All of those frameworks are very helpful. As far as how does Imperatas help, we do the connection. So if you have the data, we can mine it as is. If you don't have the data, we can start to get connections. And then once those connections are in place, we can start to mine it. But really, our value add as an organization is that we, using both research and data mining, come back with the most actionable insights at every one of these stages. And I actually attached, so I'll wait to see if any more comments come in, questions come in, but I'll put in my little plug here now at the end. The slides for this are already attached in the handouts, the Hack Your Customer's Journey slides in PDF form. Also, I have the Tier 1 and Tier 2 information about Imperatas and how we approach this. Tier 1 being we start with the existing data that's there. We connect all that data. We mine all that data. At some point, you're going to run out of insights from your existing data, and then that's where Tier 2 kicks in. We add a layer of research. We start to bridge it to what we've learned in Tier 1. But again, it's all focused on the customer journey. It's all focused on that most profitable 20%, and it's all focused on actual profitable growth and beating your competitors. Any other final questions? Okay, thank you everybody for joining me today. We ended just about on time. If you have questions, let me know. My contact information is here at the end of the report. You can also get a hold of me at any of these numbers or on Twitter here. My Twitter handle's there. And you will also get a survey at the end of this. We would appreciate it very much if you fill it out and be brutally honest. And we will see some of you at the next webinar. Thank you.